Hey everyone, and welcome to Boston Autoblog. The year is 1998, 22 years ago. Crosstown rival Mercedes-Benz comes out with a vehicle called the M-Class, which would be used in the Jurassic Park movie franchise and become a cultural icon of its day. 1 year later, BMW, using the same platform as a Range Rover, comes out with a vehicle called the X5. And from that day forward started one of the greatest rivalries in automotive history. Now that initial head-to-head matchup between the X5 and the M-Class really began one of the hottest markets that we know today, and that is the crossover and SUV segments. The X5 was the first crossover in the BMW lineup, and the M-Class was the first crossover in the Mercedes-Benz lineup. Today, here we are with BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Audi all vying for that top spot, and right now, the X5 is sitting very comfortably in the top spot for this particular segment of crossovers. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the biggest and most luxurious X5 BMW has ever made, and also see why it might be the perfect crossover for you. Now before we get in this review, I'd like to thank Herb Chambers BMW Sudbury in Sudbury, Massachusetts for allowing me to do this review. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive BMW inventory. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. Just prior to the new millennium, SUVs were beginning their steep ascent to automotive domination, as Americans were buying into the versatility, utility, and practicality that they couldn't receive with the family sedan. As German automakers started entering emerging markets, luxury SUVs and crossovers became a serious endeavor for BMW and Mercedes-Benz. These vehicles were perceived to offer a more upscale and premium driving experience, while also retaining off-road capability and being road trip worthy for active families. Here we are 2 decades later, and fundamentally nothing has changed. However, the X5 and its rivals have taken a direction where lavishness, performance, and impeccable styling have come together to make these vehicles the most appealing segment for buyers in the United States. As mentioned earlier, the 4th generation X5 is the largest in its history, with a length of 194 inches. Putting that into perspective, the X5 of 2000 was about 10 inches shorter, which is actually smaller than the current X3. With this additional length, BMW can now fit a 3rd row into the X5. But as we'll discuss later, you sacrifice cargo room for extra passengers. Giving this crossover year-round versatility is a ground clearance of 8.7 inches, which outclasses the Audi Q7 and Mercedes-Benz GLE. When it comes to pricing, the X5 xDrive40i starts just over $61,000, with the model we have today being well equipped at $74,700. Up front, the X5's road presence is very similar to most crossovers in the BMW lineup, thanks to its traditional kidney grille design that differs slightly from the bigger X7. LED headlights come standard, but you can opt for adaptive LEDs with laser light for improved illumination at night. Since our model has the X-Line appearance package, chrome accents are integrated into the front fascia, rather than having the sportier aesthetics found on the M Sport. However, the overall road presence for the X5 is classy, and a bit understated compared to the X7. But most BMW loyalists would probably prefer the conventional design cues that have evolved for this model throughout the last 20 years. Moving over to the side profile, this X5 is sitting on 20-inch 9 V-spoke gloss black wheels as part of the Eastern Region package. You won't see them available on the configurator, as only a limited number of models were equipped with these wheels. Since we don't have the M Sport Shadowline exterior trim, the plastic cladding found around the wheel arches adds a nice contrast with the Alpine white paint. You'll get body color folding side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Coming around to the back, this is where the X5 differentiates itself from the X3, with X7-like taillights and a reshaped rear end that helps give this crossover a premium luxury road presence. These styling cues are your first indication that when you step inside, you'll be welcomed by a more upscale interior that you don't receive with the X3. Also back here, you will get a trailer hitch, and with this X5, you'll have the ability to tow up to 7,200 pounds. Under the hood, the X540i is powered by a 3-liter turbocharged inline 6-cylinder engine that puts out 335 horsepower and 330 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with an 8-speed automatic transmission. For the drivetrain, you can either go with rear-wheel drive or BMW's xDrive all-wheel drive system, which will likely be the more popular choice among consumers living in colder regions of the country. To demonstrate just how far fuel range has improved for the X5, today you can receive right around 20 miles per gallon in the city and 26 miles per gallon on the highway, whereas back in 2000 you'd be looking at 13 city and 17 highway. So this drastic improvement has also helped make the case that crossovers are an all-around practical option compared to where we were 2 decades ago. Alright, so stating the obvious at the beginning of this test drive, the X5 is a lot bigger than the X3 I reviewed last week, and you have about an additional 4 to 5 inches of width. But what I will say though is that I do have more shoulder room, but I don't feel like I'm in that much bigger of a crossover. Now when it comes to the length, you're looking at a length of around 194 inches, and you don't really feel it. I think you'd really feel that when you're parking the vehicle or backing up, but when you have the safety systems such as the 3D surround cameras, and you also have the parking assist features, it makes driving this vehicle in tight spots a lot easier to deal with. Now some people would like to say that the X5 is just a bigger X3, which doesn't do this vehicle any justice at all. Because when you start looking at the luxury features that you can start throwing on in this vehicle, you could spend about $10,000 to $15,000 of extras, and this is extras such as night vision or merino leather seats instead of the Vernasca leather seats. You have the ability to go with heated and cooled cup holders. You can go with a diamond cut glass gear shift knob, which really makes this interior much more luxurious. You can also go with a leather stitched dashboard. So when you start looking at that, you no longer look at the X5 as being a bigger X3. In fact, I'd say it's a smaller X7, or maybe the X7 is a bigger X5 with the third row. But you can get a third row in the X5, but I think that really takes away from the practicality aspect of this crossover. But my reasoning to go with the 40i instead of the M50i, like I did with the X3, which is the M40i, was because I really wanted to emphasize that this vehicle is all about luxury. And I do feel as though that the X7 has stolen the thunder from this crossover, because the X5 has always been, or really up until the X7's existence, was the flagship. It was the crossover that everyone wanted. It had the luxury features that you really were looking for in a mid-size crossover. And then the X7 comes in and it just takes that away. However, again, with those interior features, we have the digital display standard, we have the bigger touchscreen standard, and it just really adds to a quality aspect to this vehicle. Now, of course, you can go in the performance direction with this crossover, but I wanted to go with the 40i because I really just wanted to emphasize the fact that this really is much more luxurious than its smaller sibling, which is the X3. Now with the M50i and also the X5M and X5M competition, you can really have a lot of fun behind the wheel. The M50i goes from 0 to 60 around 4.6 seconds, and then when you look at the X5M, you're looking right around 4 seconds, with the X5M competition having a 0 to 60 time of right around 3.8 seconds, which is just mind-blowing to me. However, the X5 that we're in right now goes from 0 to 60 around 5.3 seconds. It has some very good pickup. But what's funny is when I say, only 5.3 seconds, it makes it sound like as if it's slow. And even though in 2020 it is, but that's still mind-boggling to me, because that's quicker than most smaller sports cars on the market. Now, what I will point out, though, is the fact that because this isn't the sport version, steering isn't as tighter, even though I'm in sport mode, and also braking, you don't have those M Sport brakes. So you do sacrifice some sporty aspect to the vehicle by going with just the X5 or the X540i. But I think if you're just looking for luxury, this is more than enough. And we'll do one short acceleration. Has a very nice pickup, very nice. Doesn't kick you back in the seat like the X3 M40i, but still plenty enough acceleration and power here to get you on the highway and up to speed. Then lastly, let's talk about suspension. Now, there's a very nice soft suspension. You can go over bumps and really not get thrown around. And that really comes down to the fact that it's not a sports tuned suspension. And it just really makes the driving experience unbelievable. It really does. Now, the seats that I'm in are contoured, so it's just, this is like sitting on a cloud right now. I'm really truly enjoying this driving experience. It's different than the X3 M40i that I reviewed last week, but it's enjoyable, it's comfortable. That's what I expect out of a luxury crossover. Inside, you're greeted by power adjustable Vernasca leather seats for both the driver and passenger. As mentioned on the test drive, these seats are contoured, which enhances the luxury aspect and driving experience when behind the wheel. The driver's side will be 2-position memory, which is perfect if you share the X5 with a family member. As we've seen with other BMWs in the lineup, your power liftgate button can be found on the driver's side door, making it very convenient if you're doing curbside pickup. Standard on the X5 is the 12.3-inch digital display, adding a modernized feel to the interior and offering up-to-date technology you expect to receive in this segment. For the infotainment system, you'll have a 10-inch touchscreen with Apple CarPlay and onboard navigation. Just like BMWs of the past, you will have a rotary dial and quick access buttons found on the center console, which in my opinion is easier to use rather than swiping left and right on the touchscreen. Scrolling through different menus is effortless with this dial, and helps keep your eyes on the road rather than the screen itself. With BMW's iDrive 7 system, you'll have different experience modes, which will automatically set the mood, such as closing the panoramic sunroof and activating the ambient lighting. As part of the parking assist package, you will receive 3D camera angles for added safety and peace of mind. You'll have a rear backup camera with trajectory, front and rear parking sensors, and a top view camera, making it virtually impossible to curb your wheels or back into a parked car. Beneath the touchscreen, you'll have 2 rows of buttons, one being for your 2-zone climate control and 3 level heated seats up front. And below that will be all your radio presets and volume knob. Equipped on this X5 will be a wireless phone charging pad and an additional compartment for another smartphone, which can be kept out of sight to give the center console a sleek appearance. Of course, you will have the drive mode buttons, affecting steering input and throttle response. Also here, you'll find the buttons for your various camera angles and park assist features. And rounding out the front seating area, for the center storage compartment, you'll have enough room for a smartphone or smaller items. Now for passengers in the back, we're going to start off with the passenger side, and I adjusted the seat a little bit further back, and I have plenty of legroom to work with. Now obviously, I'm not the tallest person out there, I'm around 5'5". However, I think people are maybe 5'8" or 5'9", could be comfortable back here, especially with the seat adjusted this far back. But more importantly is headroom, and I noticed this with the X3 M40i last week, I'm noticing it today with the X5, is that even with the panoramic sunroof, you're not going to sacrifice that headroom. So I think people are maybe 5'10", 6 foot tall and above, could be comfortable back here and not the slouch, which is definitely important. Now, for the center seat, I have a lot of legroom to work with here. There's some nice placements for my feet. The center hump is not aggressive at all. I'd even argue that's not even existent. Now, I think you could definitely fit a third person back here at all times, because compared to the X3 that I reviewed last week, there's a lot more shoulder room. And I think you could have smaller adults, maybe even closer to average size adults back here, and they won't be cramped. I think people with broader shoulders obviously would make it a little more cramped, maybe a little more difficult for me to be comfortable. But I do think if you have kids, specifically 3 kids, this definitely works. There's enough room back here for all occupants to be comfortable. And then on the driver's side, I have plenty of legroom. Of course, the seat is adjusted to someone of my height, around 5'5", and I am definitely very comfortable. I could just recline and relax back here. So if you are looking for a vehicle that is comfortable for all passengers in the vehicle, the X5 is definitely the way to go. And compared to the X3, what I notice immediately is just the amount of shoulder room that I have in this vehicle. Particularly on this side, I think it's because the seat is just a little bit further up. But I just have a lot of shoulder room to work with, and there is no way that I feel cramped at all. So I think this is definitely a great option to go with, especially if you have a growing family or a bigger family, or you do have 3 people in the vehicle in the back at all times. Now, also really interesting is the layout of the interior for passengers in the back, because the USB inputs are mounted on the backs of the front seats, which I think is really cool and convenient, but I've never seen that before inside a vehicle that I've reviewed on this channel. Now, we do have 4-zone climate control as part of the premium package. We also have the buttons for our temperature display, so we can change the temperature if we want to, but I'm going to keep it cool because it's very warm out. We also have the buttons for your fan speed and also where you want the fan to be or the air to be blowing on you. We also have 2 rear air vents for the center, but also 2 additional rear air vents on the pillars, so all occupants back here can stay cool or warm depending on the temperature outside. And then rounding out the rear seating area, we do have a leather armrest with 2 cup holders. Now, for rear cargo space, you can expect to see right around 34 cubic feet of rear cargo room, and that's with the rear seats folded up. With the rear seats folded down, that space nearly doubles in size to 72 cubic feet. So this vehicle is very practical, and also it's one of the reasons why I highly recommend that you go with the 2-row version of the X5 rather than going with a 3rd row. I think the 3rd row will limit the amount of room you have back there, and unless you have a bigger family, it just makes no sense to add that 3rd row. Now, what I do want to point out, though, is that we do have a split tailgate, and this is what actually distinguishes the X5 from the X3. We did not see this in the X3. Now, this actually is really useful if you have bigger items or heavier items, and you just want to slide them right in. Makes it very easy. There's no lift that you need to worry about. However, when it's not in use, you can just press the button, and it will lift automatically. But personally, for convenience features and just for convenience in general, I'd rather have that down. Now, also found inside the X5 are quick release tabs on either side of the rear cargo area. And by simply tugging on them, the rear seats will fold automatically, and it makes things very effortless and convenient to store your items in, and you can be on your way. Now, that's a feature that we saw in the X3, and I think it's a feature that will definitely get overlooked. People won't talk about too much. But when it comes to convenience and also not exerting any energy or effort at all, that's something I like, especially if I'm loading up heavy boxes, heavy items. I want convenience, and that's exactly what I love about BMWs, specifically the X3 and the X5 that we've reviewed so far on this channel. Now, lastly, you do get a rear cargo cover, which keeps all your valuable items out of sight. Really a great feature for peace of mind, especially where if you do plan on maybe, having expensive gear in the back, or, you're leaving your vehicle unattended. Maybe you went, hiking, or maybe after a shopping spree, you went to, a restaurant or something after that. You don't need to worry about people peeking in and possibly stealing your items. So definitely love the cargo cover, and that's one extra feature, minor feature, that I love about the X5. And then once you're done, it's not necessary to have to press the button on the lower portion of the split tailgate. To press the button like you normally would on any crossover, and the liftgate will close automatically. Now, at the end of the day, what I want to emphasize here is that the X5 really is a premium luxury crossover. And you could make the argument that it's a baby X7, which does make sense because when you look at the X7 and prior to its existence, the X5 was the flagship for all crossovers in the BMW lineup. Now, some people do compare the X5 to the X3, and I do think to a certain degree that is justified, because from the exterior and even from the interior, depending on how you spec your vehicles, they do look very similar. You have the exact same digital display, you have the same infotainment system, very similar layout when it comes to dashboard and center console. However, that's where the similarities end, because the X5 is 4 to 5 inches wider, and because of that, I have a lot more room, a lot more shoulder room, but also I have more room for the center armrest and also the armrest on my left side as well. But also, when you close the doors, or when you touch all the padding, the soft touch padding and materials in this vehicle, it's a lot more premium than the X3. And that's where I see the X5 being a much more luxurious vehicle. Now, also, when it comes to add-ons, you could spend anywhere between $2,000 to $15,000. I mean, the one we have right now is right around $74,000, and that's not everything included. You could spend an additional $10,000 on top of this price tag. And what would that include? That includes a leather-stitched dashboard. That includes heated and cooled cup holders, a diamond-cut glass gearshift knob, air suspension, night vision, a third row seating. I mean, we can go on and on. The list goes on forever. But that's exactly what you expect for a vehicle in this segment, and also, more importantly, in its price range. Now, what I do want to point out, though, is that the X540i is not as sporty. So if you're looking for a sporty aspect, a sporty driving experience, then you're going to want to go with the M50i or the X5M. Because what I noticed immediately is that the steering was not as tight, and also the braking wasn't as responsive. So just like with the X3 M40i, the X3 M40i was tighter, and the braking was better because of those M Sport brakes. So if you want better steering and better braking, you're going to want to go with the M50i for the X5. But I think if luxury is most important, that's all you're going to do, you don't really care about speed, you don't really care about power or braking ability, then the X5 is definitely the better way to go. It's a better option to go with, especially where if you are into premium luxury features and you have a budget of around $80,000 to $85,000. But at the end of the day, if you are looking at getting an X3 or an X5, I would definitely recommend checking out the X5 if luxury is a top priority. Now, I enjoyed the X3 when it came to its size and also its sporty aspect with the X3 M40i. Obviously, with the X5 40i, that's a whole different story. But I do think this vehicle is better suited for a bigger family because there's a lot more room, especially where when it comes to shoulder room, a lot more shoulder room, and even for passengers in the back, they're not going to be as cramped. It's better suited for a family of 5 than I would say in the X3. But also, if you're not looking at a vehicle the size of an X7, then the X5 is actually really nicely sized. And like I said during my test drive, you don't really feel the size of the vehicle. Obviously, when you have someone next to you, you're not as claustrophobic. There's a lot more shoulder room. You can still be very comfortable with your armrests, but you don't really feel that size at all, especially when you have additional safety technology where it makes it almost virtually impossible to curb your wheels or back into some other parked vehicle, or really get yourself into a tight situation when you're in a parking lot. So definitely think the X5 is definitely worth the price, around $80,000 to $85,000, especially if you go with all the packages and also all the optional features you can go with. I think that's when the X5 really becomes that baby X7 and really provides a lot of value and comfort in its segment and also its price range. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys next time.